Hi, everybody. Are we good to go? Okay.
Can you guys hear me? Yes. All right. Forgive me as I stare at my phone to get the script exactly right. My name is Libby, and I am introducing the next speaker of the 2024 Northwest Interlibrary Loan and Resource Sharing Conference. Today is September 19th. 18th. Thank you. See, you guys are better at this than I am. This is visualizing ILL data for patron education. Our speaker right now is Rosie Everson. I am the convener for the session, so either poke me if you're in person or leave a message in chat if there's any kind of technology problem, and I'll do my best to make sure that you can hear and see the slides at the same time. This session is being recorded with permission from the presenters. We plan to make these recordings available once captions have been added. Expect an email from Whova when the recordings have been posted about 3 weeks after the conference. We will take questions from the room and from virtual attendees on Whova. Our virtual colleagues should post questions on the Whova Q&A tab. And don't forget to upvote your favorites. After the session, please complete the survey, and there's a link for it everywhere, to enter in our prize contest, and it's good prizes this year. If anyone in this room is logged into Whova, please remember to not start this presentation on your device. And now I will turn the session over to our presenter.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Visualizing ILL Data for Patron Education. I'm Rosie Everson, and I'm the ILL and Circulation Specialist at Whatcom County Library System up in Bellingham, Washington. If you're not familiar, it's about 2 hours north of Seattle. I'd like to confess up front that I'm not a data expert or data scientist, which feels a little weird telling everybody, a room full of people standing on a stage talking about data visualizations, but here we are. This method for visualizing ILL data started as a DIY project after a patron had requested a map that showed all of the other libraries that we had borrowed material from. This request informed an ILL-focused booth that I created for a community event in 2023 that shared these visualizations and educated patrons about ILL services. This presentation is a summary of that work and will provide a set of tools for replicating and hopefully extending my own outcome. In this session, I'll demonstrate how to turn WorldShare reports into visualizations using Excel, Google Maps, and other tools online. I'll address a few design considerations, challenges to the process, and context for sharing. And I'll finish by describing how impactful visualizing ILL data can be and demonstrating the value of the library to your community. This will be pretty quick, but my slides will be available online after, and hopefully they can be a reference for later if you want to go through the same process. Before getting started, it's helpful to ask yourself a few questions. Consider who the audience is that you're making these for. Are they going to be ILL newbies, possibly heavy users of the service, probably a combination of everything in between? What information might they already know? And what points are you trying to absolutely communicate through your data? The answers to these questions are helpful in deciding what data to include and how to present it. Just a quick overview of the reports we'll be using. There are 6 reports that I used in this project, highlighted here for reference. They're accessed through the OCLC usage statistics from the WorldShare homepage. Briefly, the resource sharing stats reports are edited and used to make charts that break down ILL activity by item type or genre. Activity overview reports are used to create a graph showing filled and unfilled items over time. And the transaction level detail reports can be edited and uploaded into Google Maps to show libraries that you've lent to or borrowed from. If you haven't spent any time with OCLC statistics, this is what a raw report looks like. Oops, going back. It's kind of a hot mess. We're going to take this, which has like a bulk of extraneous information, and turn it into something more manageable. This can be somewhat of a time-consuming process and varies based on the chart or map that you're intending to make. I'm not going to demo this exactly because it's basically just deleting cells you don't think you need and filling in some missing information. The goal is to pare the spreadsheet down to essential information, and depending on the visual you're trying to make, it'll probably be a combination of library name, location, material format, title, author, and call number. For the spreadsheet shown here on this slide, I sorted individual line items by call number over on the right to find missing call numbers, because sometimes the reports don't pull completely perfectly. You can search the ISBN or title, which will be in the original spreadsheet or in the original report. You search the ISBN or title in your catalog, and then you can find the call number that way. And then when you're sorting the data to make a table like this, it makes it easier to sort by call number. There are also sometimes syntax errors that need to be fixed manually. And then in this case, on the left, I added larger categories or subject headings to be used later in your visualization. So for example, parapsychology and occult, psychology and self-help, etc. Those are just labels I assigned to each group. Let's see. If you only want to include filled requests, pay attention to the lender filled date on these reports, because otherwise you'll be using both, basically all requests that you get. If you don't want to include unfilled, so if you only want to represent filled requests, delete those that do not have a filled date or that do have an unfilled date. This is sort of the most finicky aspect of this process, but it's worth noting that if your data is properly cleaned up and sorted, it makes generating charts in Excel easy and also ensures that they'll be more accurate. As you get started in Excel, it's important to consider how the design of your charts impacts how the data is understood. Firstly, basic charts are easiest to understand and serve the widest audience. This includes bar and pie charts and line graphs. All good?
This is what they're seeing right now. Is that what they're supposed to be seeing?
Yes. Cool. Yeah. Something to note with bar charts, you want to use a zero baseline typically, which Excel does automatically. Here we have two charts displaying the same data set, the most popular nonfiction genres lent to other libraries. On the left is my first version, and on the right is the second draft after applying a few design elements. To avoid information overload, I cut the original 20+ categories down to 15. Horizontal text display is easier to read, and grouping them by value allows for a logical flow of information with the most requested subject up the top. Color is used to group subjects by a broader category, humanities, sciences, and leisure in this case. And then keep in mind that not all viewers have the same perceptive ability. Excel and other tools have accessibility checks that can check to see if the graphic is readable for a colorblind viewer in this case. This is a similar example as to how to improve the impact of your graphs. Instead of randomizing colors, as you see on the left, the pie chart on the right uses color to indicate hierarchy, where the darker the blue, the higher rate of borrowing requests. 3D effects skew perspective and distort size, which can lead to an inaccurate perception of numbers. So before I jump into Excel, I'd like to mention a few ways that data visualizations can demonstrate the value of ILL services. They can illustrate, excuse me, not used to talking this much, the variety of material available to request, the global and national connections to other libraries, increasing use of service, the reach and impact of the collection over time, and changing trends in borrowing and lending. So now I'm just going to jump into the Excel spreadsheets that I was working with here. And let's see. Actually, how do I drag the spreadsheet over? Do you know? How do I, if I want to go to the different tabs on the bottom? I'm just not sure how to get it over.
What do you want?
Nonfiction genre on the very bottom. Oh, I see. Okay. I think I got it. I just couldn't find the mouse. All right. So this spreadsheet we saw, I had already explained that I manually added subject headings over on the left. This is basically a reduced table, reduced only to subject and value. The rest of these sheets, you can see how much the data gets distilled down into pretty basic data tables. If you've never used Excel very much before, it's very simple to generate charts automatically. You just highlight the data set and head over to Insert, Recommended Charts over here, and then you can also play around with other visuals in that way. This is a tree map chart, which is an alternative to the bar chart that's useful for showing parts of a whole. In this case, nonfiction borrowing by subject and category. Just a basic donut chart showing the frequency of borrowed items by format. A similar pie chart breaking down various requests by fiction genre. And again, you can see how much the information is distilled down from the original reports. In this case, I manually assigned genre to individual line items on a previous table and then tallied them to create these tables on the left. All right. Essentially, Excel is the most useful and easiest tool to use when you're getting started in this process. Tableau Public is an alternative to Excel and is a free platform online that you can use to build data visualizations. It's a more advanced option that I found comes with like a much steeper learning curve. This bubble chart, which displays the most popular nonfiction subjects borrowed in a 1-month period, was the most successful graphic I was able to complete after much fiddling around. The platform itself is less intuitive when it comes to adding data and formatting text. In this example, I struggled to make the text more legible or display numerical values. Basically, I was just learning as I went, and I haven't quite mastered the program. You can import spreadsheet data from Excel, and like Excel's recommended charts, Tableau has the Show Me button that generates charts automatically. So sharing ILL visualizations with patrons provides an opportunity to engage and educate. This chart, returning to 1 month of nonfiction borrowing, reflects the variety of community interests and spurs conversation. When you're sharing these with patrons, you can consider, what story does this overview tell about your community? Where were you surprised? Or you could ask, where were your expectations confirmed? For example, Whatcom County patrons heavily request material related to the humanities, including history, Christianity, and literature, and have a strong interest in nature and art. During the event that I attended with this data, one patron came up and commented on how excited they were to see the high interest in Christianity, for example. And in this way, patrons can see themselves reflected in library service and understand the value as it pertains to them and other community members. Data visualizations like this one are useful in highlighting increased interest in and use of interlibrary loans. Let's see. This chart basically just shows, and I see now the July, that July 2024 should be over on the far right, but it just shows the increasing filled requests over the month of July from 2022 to 2024. It's helpful to add interpretive text on the bottom so people see what they're looking at. These types of graphs can be shared with staff in reporting to administration, and anytime advocacy of ILL services is the goal. And it's certainly not a bad idea to share these with patrons, as it shows that ILL service is growing and a viable resource for them to use. This graph shows the fluctuation of filled requests for lending and borrowing. Tells a similar story to the previous slide, but over a longer period of time. In our case, borrowing has surpassed numbers prior to the COVID-19 dip, and while lending has not caught up, the numbers of filled requests are still on the rise. You can see over the orange line, lending, back in 2019, we are at 780 filled requests for the month of December or so, and then around July of 2024, we're just almost back at 700, whereas borrowing, we had 698 back in 2019, and now we were at 719. just last July. So from this graph, you can draw several possible conclusions. We have a strong ILL borrowing program. That could be perhaps patrons are more aware of ILL services due to library promotion efforts and branch staff communicating with patrons. On the lending side, we could be filling less requests because we could be receiving less. That could just still be COVID recovery or, I don't know, general fluctuations in ILO requests. You can add unfilled requests to the graph if you so choose, and that would be part of the original report that you would pull out of OCLC. Overall, this visualization tells a success story that shows resiliency and continuing impact of library resource sharing. Right, moving on to Google Maps. Google Maps is a very useful tool in demonstrating the scope of your connections to local, national, and global libraries, in addition to the resources at your disposal available to serve patrons. So we'll take a look at a few maps I've created. Just head over there. All right, so this Google map shows 5 different visualizations, and sorry, it'd be nice to have it. Dang. Sorry, I'm just trying to be able to see this map also on the screen, but I'm having issues. Oh, thank you. All right, this is slightly easier. Bear with me while I figure this out. Okay, so this first lending map shows all libraries that we lent to in a set time period, which I color coded by library type, where the blue little dots there are public, purple is academic, orange I think was government, and yellow I think correctional facilities. The way that these were added to Google Maps is very straightforward. Let's see. So from Google Maps, you would import a basic table that just shows the number of, or a list of all of the libraries that you pulled out of OCLC, and then the number of items that were sent to those libraries. That you can import straight into Google Maps. And I was planning to show you, but the display is just slightly different than what I was looking at home. So I'm not sure how to get to that page, but it's basically just a button that says import, and you import your Excel data table. Now, let's see. So if you want to change the styles of your icons here, there's a way to do that. Oh man, I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong page. But we can view this in Google Earth in any case. So in addition to this map, which shows ILL lending, I created a separate one for borrowing. And it's a little easier to see when you're actually looking on a computer screen, but toggling between these two, you can see with borrowing, there's actually many more academic libraries that we borrow from than we lend to. Going back to comparing those two. So these are the types of conclusions you can point out to patrons when you're sharing them. We also have a borrowing heat map style, which probably has too many data points. But if you zoom in, you can see that the darker the icon, the more that we borrow from. This is a similar style heat map showing just the top 15 libraries we borrowed from in a 3-month period, all in the Pacific Northwest. And when you're in Google Maps or Google My Maps, there's a way to edit the icons to display a book in this case. And then finally, this is just another way to display your data by numerical value with library name as well. So when you're thinking about sharing these with patrons, both Maps and Google Earth are fun to play around with. Let's go back to this lending map. So we'll look at the same map in both Google Maps and Google Earth. Spin around here. So this is back looking at the lending data for a 3-month period. You can see that Google Maps actually has much better visibility of the data points. It's clearer and you can make out the color codes better. Overall, it's just a clearer display, and it's easier to toggle, I think, between the different map layers, lending, borrowing, heat map, etc. Google Earth is a little bit more visually striking if the patrons are encountering it for the first time. However, there's more visual noise, and as you can see with all of the library names, it's a bit cluttered, although I think you could turn off the setting so you're not actually displaying the library names. At the community event that I attended, I toggled between Google Earth and Google Maps, and patrons were most struck, I think, by the global connections we have to libraries in Australia and in Europe. So the important part is that Google Maps and Google Earth are both effective in visualizing the surprising geographic scope of ILL service that is typically invisible to patrons. And that's kind of the key of the Google Map visualizations, I think, is that patrons often have no idea that your library is doing this. And it's exciting for them to find out. All right, now I'm going to move back into our PowerPoint here. So when the time comes to assemble your charts and maps together, there are many tools to make comprehensive visuals and infographics. Once you have your data cleaned up and your charts made, you can start to get creative in a design sense. Canva is a free cloud-based platform that I use to make this graphic, which I originally had printed out on a poster for our community event. This combines Excel charts with general information about interlibrary loans. There's definitely things I would change about this now. The graphs are a bit chaotic and it's a bit tends towards being information overload. But ideally, it would be something like this would be used in a setting that allows you to explain individual elements and interpret them for patrons. The goal here is to educate patrons on the basics of the service while piquing their interest in the possibilities. So this is a similar infographic also made using Canva. It's more pared down and interpretive, but based on the same data as the previous infographic. Instead of cramming as much information as possible into the display, it contextualizes the data and provides broad impressions like increasing use and connections to Pacific Northwest libraries and the popularity of certain material and authors. And I went so far as to distill the information down from the reports by author to find the most requested fiction authors, for example, which I just think is fun. So in other words, this type of infographic incorporates the elements of storytelling to translate the information a little bit more clearly. So I did not make this bubble chart, but thought it would be a good example of something that could be easily reproducible in Canva. In place of which countries by region publish the most books, you could make a which countries by region do we borrow the most material from, or which authors by topic are the most popular. Like Canva, Piktochart is a similar platform that provides pre-made templates and built-in design components like lists and charts graphs and maps. However, you're only allowed 2 free downloads before you have to pay, although you can kind of cheat by screenshotting your designs, but they'll be a lower resolution. This is a basic flowchart that I made for patrons who are perhaps being introduced to interlibrary loans for the first time that explains the process and timeline for requesting items. There are a number of challenges, I think, to this process. Like me, you might have a lack of expertise and skills. You may be learning as you go along. So approaching the technology learning curve can be a bit daunting, especially when it comes to programs like Tableau. Choosing the right tool can be confusing. Cleaning up data is time consuming, and you may not have very much of this precious resource. The reliability and accuracy of data, it's easy to make a small mistake when you're doing the data cleanup process. And I know that I discovered a few when I was revisiting my charts for this presentation. For me, there's always an element of doubt when sharing this type of information with patrons because it seems so niche when you work in it every day. I found myself wondering who cares. And then in my experience, actually a surprising number of people are excited about this. Is it too niche? No, I don't think so. A number of groups have vested interest in the service as taxpayers and users of library. A lot of the free software like Canva and Piktochart has AI built into it. And I think along with that comes with a lot of other AI related ethical implications. That's probably a whole nother topic, but something to consider. When I started using Canva, I was actually talking to a coworker, a designer who was kind of bad-mouthing the platform because she thought it took away work from people who were employed as graphic designers, which is a valid argument. So using these tools, you might be sort of taking away the work from graphic designers you already have on staff. And then uneven, consistent branding. Infographics might not reflect library design standards. But if you have like an in-house design style sheet or something, you can always use that as a reference. So this information, you may be wondering, once you have it all put together, where could you use it? Community events like the one I attended are good opportunities to share and engage with patrons. On your website at the ILL submission page is another great place. Social media posts, email, a resource display sharing, display in the branch, and really anywhere your patrons are present, you can use this as an opportunity to advocate for ILL services. Data visualizations are equally useful to educate library staff and board. You can share them in internal communications. We have like an internal website that we use to post documentation and updates that I've shared this information on. Importantly, staff education equals patron education. Patrons won't understand the scope of ILL service if your staff doesn't. And then they can be reported to the board, underscoring the importance of ILL services as part of overall circulation. And they can also be integrated into community presentations. I know our leadership presents at city fundraisers and events in the county. This data could have a presence to extend awareness. So to wrap things up, just a quick recap as to why we should do this at all. Attractive visualizations inspire curiosity and engage your patrons, which encourages public understanding and use of ILL. ILL service supports patrons' right to read by enabling access to information they might not be able to safely or comfortably access elsewhere. The data can mirror strengths and weaknesses of library collections. For example, borrowing habits indicate what aren't your patrons getting at your library, and lending habits can show what aspects of your collection are utilized most by outside libraries. And ultimately, this method increases visibility and demonstrates the value of library services to your community. I included a short bibliography, and if you ever have questions or comments, I'd be happy to receive an email. That's it.
All right. We're going to be taking questions now, and I have a few from the Q&A in chat that I'm going to read out loud. But if you in the live audience have any questions, just raise your hand and Katie will get a speaker to you. Okay, so first question for you. How many of you encounter patrons who have no idea what interlibrary loan is?
Happens all the time.
Yeah, I think we can all agree with that. I'm not sure if these are questions for the group or questions for Rosie, but I'm going to ask them to Rosie, and if you have an answer, put it in Q&A. Has anyone used maps to visualize lending, borrowing data for patrons and other interested parties? I think that came in before you covered it in your
I think
presentation.
so, yeah.
Yes.
And
okay.
I did see that one person has used Google Maps in the past, but I think there was just that one reply.
Have any of you had the ILL resource sharing position be entirely vacant for any duration and then had to step in to assess and complete the ILL resource sharing workflows? I think there was a slight misunderstanding. These seem to be general questions as opposed to questions for you.
Sure.
But we're good at adapting here in the library, so go for it.
Oh, I think we have a question in the audience.
Yeah.
This is just a simple question, but how long did all of that take?
That's a good question. It's been a process. I'm not really sure how many hours I spent on it, but kind of a lot. Maybe like 30 hours total, like a full week. Less, not over a week's worth of work. I'm lucky that my job has some flexibility where I get my regular workflow done and have time to do special projects like this. But yeah, I would say maybe 30, 40 hours total.
Follow up, do you see this as viable as something that you could do every year or on a repeating basis, or would that be too much work to do?
I think if I was doing it once a year, it would work. I don't think I'd be able to do it monthly based on the time commitment, but I think once a year I would have space to do like a yearly report or something.
I was curious if you had any recommended learning resources for people who are less than skilled with Excel and or Google Maps.
Right. I mean, I'm also not super great at Excel. This was about the extent of my Excel abilities. In the resources page that I included here, the bibliography, there's a few books that I referenced that were actually pretty helpful that were also specific to libraries. So I would maybe check out, let's see, Data Visualization, A Guide to Visual Storytelling for Libraries. I think I actually ILL'd that for myself. And Tableau too, if you're interested in going even further with something like Tableau, they have learning resources on their website too, that if you have a lot of time, you could also devote time to learning that way.
Hi, I was wondering if you had if you saw an increase in borrowing requests after showing these visualizations at your community event.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I feel like I didn't pay close enough attention. Like I didn't think to look right after. Although I know when I was at the event, I did get a number of people wanting to request items in the moment. So I would just make a note and request them later, especially international items. There was a man who wanted like a German children's book, and seeing the map that, oh, we can get items from Australia and Europe, et cetera. I think that inspired him to, oh, well, could you get this random kids book published in Germany in the 60s or something?
Did you get a general increase? Like did you get a general increase?
That I
even
don't
if it was
know
a
for
blip?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I could maybe look at I could pull up the map and see if there was a jump right after the event, like in November, and track it that way. But I just don't remember.
Let me
Yeah.
ask a quick one from the Q&A. With Google Maps/Earth, is there a way to download the data into it and have it generate the maps, or do you have to do it manually?
There is a way to upload it, and I was just struggling to show it with the way the screen was working. But once you're in Google Maps or Google My Maps, there is there's a little button that says import, and you can upload a spreadsheet directly that will automatically plot your map items. And that's really was a key for me in doing that, because it would have taken so much longer to hand map that. But yeah, import, and then also to note, it doesn't automatically recognize some of the names. Like if you're importing, say, King County Library System, it might not know it's in Issaquah. So usually with a table like that, there's a set, like maybe 8 or so out of a table of 25 that you have to hand type in Issaquah or, Portland or something. But the time commitment there is a lot shorter, or just a lot less than having to hand plot every single map point.
Thank you. And related to that question, I haven't had any luck with creating pie charts in Excel so far. Is there an easier tech tool to help create charts for the tech challenged among us?
I feel like in my experience, Excel is the most straightforward, at least is what I found in this experience. I would maybe try checking out some YouTube tutorials, could probably help. But yeah, as far as I know, Excel is a good place to start. Yes.
So when doing the Google Maps, how do you color coordinate, or how do you make the different colors on there? Like, you have to go by individually, or can you like highlight a group of like academic ones and color code all those? Or
I did them individually.
okay,
Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
that's what I figured. But I figured there might have been a way like group them together.
There
but-
might be a way to batch change them.
The heat map can do it by itself, but everything else you have to tell it.
Right. Any other questions?
Anybody in? Okay. In the end, what ended up being your favorite software to make these beautiful charts? Canva, Excel, PictoChart, question mark.
A favorite of mine.
Yeah.
I liked Canva. If you're like creatively inclined, it's pretty fun to play with.
Any more in person before I continue?
Yes.
Okay.
Mine's more of a comment than a question. I also did something like this last year because we do a yearly statistics report. So I was already pulling the data, and it was very time consuming to, figure out which libraries and how many. And I was like, I don't know if I'm getting this data the right way. But instead of doing it by specific library, I looked at by state. And then I just Googled if there was a way to put it on a map. And there is a website called mapchart.net. And it was free to download and color code. And I did articles and loans, and then you can make different colors on it. So we could say, oh, we borrowed articles and books from these states and only articles from these states. And I found that website helpful and visually striking as well. And you can do the United States, and then they have world maps as well. So
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Map, can you say it again?
mapchart.net.
Mapchart.net. Thanks.
Quick question here. Is there a way to merge two data sets to input them in Google Maps? I collect data from OCLC and RapidILL, but they generate separate data sets.
The way I'm understanding that, you could just copy the data into one Excel spreadsheet. I don't know if that answers the question, but some of the charts I was putting together, like the July monthly chart that showed the increasing use over July from 2022 to 2024. Sometimes I was copy and pasting from other Excel charts or other Excel tables, to combine the information together. So maybe it's a matter of just combining it manually, I guess. But yeah.
However, if you're combining two different data sources, you may have to normalize the columns. So
Right.
you'll have to figure out
Yeah.
what things equal what, and then maybe probably add columns to one of them and then copy and paste.
So we just have 4 minutes left. I'm going to ask a couple quick, easy ones from the online attendees. Well, any of you think of a question, raise your hand. Where do you primarily pull your data from?
Just straight out of OCLC WorldShare reports. There's a slide at the beginning that shows the ones I use specifically. Going back to it now.
I copied this from chat. Great question. Is there a way to just get the cities from the OCLC report rather than library names?
Yes, I believe it's this lender borrower transaction level detail report should have, they wanted the cities, or Ooh, actually, it will tell you the states. Cities, I don't remember off the top of my head. But if you can, I think it would be in that report.
Great. Does it take 30 hours each time you create such a visualization?
No, I think the 30 hours was the like trial and error, figuring it out time included. Now that I know how to do it, if I wanted to reproduce this, it would take a lot less time, I would say. Like if I wanted to recreate, this chart, for example, in Excel, I think I could do that in probably, 10 to 15 minutes. And then something in Canva would maybe take me, I mean, it depends on how much time you want to spend, but something like this I could do in an hour or two. So the more you do it, you learn it, and it becomes a lot easier, and then you kind of open yourself up to more advanced stuff, I think.
I was just curious if your library charges public patrons for interlibrary loan requests.
No, we do not.
What if you obtain materials outside OCLC? Do you need to keep separate data?
That's a good question. I think it depends on how many of those requests you're filling or receiving. I probably get one request outside of OCLC every few months, if that, a few a year. So I didn't include them in these data sets. But if you're getting a lot, it would make sense, I think, to track them.
Is there any limitation for importing documents?
Importing documents into,
It doesn't clarify.
I would think so. Sometimes when I've tried to import a data table from Excel into Google Maps, if I have too much information, it's not going to read all of the place names accurately. So yes, I think you want to have your Excel tables like as clean as possible, whether you're importing into Google Maps or Tableau or elsewhere.
That looks like all the questions I have in the Q&A. Are there any more in person?
Thanks,
All
everybody.
right.
Thank you.
We have a whole minute left. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have a break next.